Hello everyone, this is Mini Ninja speaking. For today's episode, we're going to be looking at the revised version of the XCocoon Studio Cyberpunk Fighters Club Quinn Lee figure, as well as its accompanying accessory pack. Now, for those that might not be in the know, the main story behind this particular toy is that it was advertised for sale well before both Storm Collectibles as well as Jada Toys announced that they're going to be doing official Street Fighter Alpha themed toys. So at one point in time, this was going to be considered the only game in town for something that would be fitting the bill as a tracksuit version of Chun-Li from those respective games, as well as many of the Versus series games back from the Capcom arcade heyday. Now, the reason I mentioned this being the revised version of the toy is, as you see from the little packaging on there, it had a couple of extra joints for both wrist joints as well as shoulder joints, because the first version of this toy that came out into the Asian markets was a bit notorious for having various issues on the upper torso, especially the shoulders, cracking because they were just much too snug in the overall torso and causing the joints to break trying to use them or move them around. So, it's nice that they did go around and revise that design, so there's less issues of that now to my understanding, as well as providing additional backups, just to make sure, in case of anything, you as a consumer are covered. So, always a pleasant surprise. Now, looking at the actual main figure itself there, figure stands at, I'm going to say just a little shy of 5 inches tall from what I remember on that one. It's a 5'12" figure. And in terms of its general its general posability, honestly, very impressive. Now, as I'll kind of elaborate as we see more in the head sculpt or the accessory bits later on there, the head itself is kind of assembled in an odd way, as it's not one singular piece, but rather two parts. Both the back of the head as well as kind of more front-facing literal face plates that kind of allow for extra mobility at the top there, as well as having a 10 or double ball pegs at both the top as well as the bottom of the neck. Upper torso, in terms of the shoulders, which has been the problem point of this one, are actually a little more limited. I mean, it is kind of a odd double shoulder joint thing on there, but it is not the most interesting thing. And the rest of the arm is honestly pretty nondescript. Good ab crunch, good waist swivel. But honestly, if you're talking about this toy, you're looking at the leg articulation here, because obviously kicking is a very large version of both Chun-Li and unofficial Chun-Li over here. And you get leg articulation in spades. On top of being just a very muscular set of legs on there. Generally, any pose you could think of that would be fitting a proper kicking position or something for Chun-Li, you could pull off on this toy. Now, as you start looking at the accessory bits, we're going to kind of start from the top up here, with a brief reminder that the head, or the two heads that come with this toy overall, include movable eyes, which, just so you have an idea how that's accessed, basically you take off the front-facing part of the head, which is what I mentioned earlier, and you use this included tool in order to kind of move them around. At least that's the idea anyway. Frankly, I found the ones on both of my heads here were definitely a bit too snug, and either that was going on there or not enough leverage on the tool. I could barely get the eyes to move at all. So, nice idea, less than great execution. Maybe it's just my copy, though. Now, getting that back together, though, we can look at what the rest of the toy has going on. Definitely a nice series of hands, mostly martial arts based bits, along with the, obviously, for Chun-Li based, two peace signs, because that is appropriate for the character on that one. But in terms of the hands themselves, a touch generic in terms of detailing, because the detail is very soft on these hands, and with the plastic they use, the hands are actually a bit translucent if anything, which kind of makes it hard to see even more so. Now, for the effect pieces, honestly, these little wind motions really would go well with any kind of kicking motion on there. Decently colored, have a nice little gradient on there, and between that and the effect pieces, including the hit spark here, which is honestly awesomely colored between that as well as the lightning leg effect in there, you can see they all have pegs on there, which means they can actually attach to the accessory stand included, and therefore you can get some very dynamic posing out of everything, and very nice display. Now, brief reminder before we start looking into the accessory pack bit, they really want you to be very careful in how you switch parts in and out, because the original set had all those breakage issues. So, with that in mind, let's take a brief look at what they include there next, and that is going to be a brand new torso, as well as with the little metal studs on them, and I believe there's actually a double ball peg on there meant for an alternative joint or backup there, and also the more traditional wrapped hair buns that come with more future Chun-Li looks, which make it kind of weird that they include it on here, but I guess it's a nice inclusion just in case. Now, as you see me messing with the upper torso here for the alternate torso, it is worth noting that it does come in with 2 alternate shoulder things, which make an extra set of shoulder pegs already pre-installed on there. Kind of like they probably intended for you to swap the lower half of the arms and kind of swap them between the two, because there's only one set of arms. But from actual execution, I was not able to do that cleanly, so I ended up kind of swapping the arms entirely from the other torso onto this one. Once again, nice little inclusion on there for the other hair bits, but it doesn't fit for this character. Now, what does fit on this character? Once again, it's a brief reminding, posing montage here. Anything you think Chun-Li can do, I'm going to repeat myself, this figure can probably do, except cross her legs in the middle because the thighs are much too wide for that. The articulation will not accommodate that much. Now, here's a more complete version of our legally distinct Chun-Li, as well as the other torso showing off the alternate top that's provided. And no, that is not an odd bit of the video. The other torso is a little too detailed. However, in terms of details that are lacking, accuracy on the head. That is the wrong haircut for this particular version of Chun-Li. They put a more generic future one on there, which I can understand if they were kind of hedging their bets, but it's like, if you've gone this far to do an Alpha Chun-Li, just finish the job, please. Also, worth noting, I do a very bad job of it in this clip, but the shoulders does fit in. You just have to put a little more force than I did in order to get it in there. Otherwise, it does tend to pop out if you don't put it correctly. Also, why did you need to make the top that detailed on the other one? Yes, it is anatomically accurate, but no, there is no paint there, in case you're wondering. It's just a weird inclusion, and the top slips all the time, so you have to pose this alternate top very carefully. Now, getting back to the nitty-gritty of the actual figure as intended here, once again, you can pretty much pose off with any kind of style of kick you want in there, but the upper torso is a touch more limited in terms of what you can really do. Like, the lack of butterfly joints kind of mean you can't do the XCocoon as properly as you could. There's some odd posing here and there. How does this scale with other bits? Well, here's your Storm Collectibles or Storm Arena version of Ryu from that same era. And honestly, they're about the same height. It's just obviously the level of detailing will be different, but if you need a filler until the official ones come out, it's a little expensive, but this is not the worst fit. I really can't see this being any more than a filler toy, because frankly speaking, once either the Storm Collectibles or Jetta Toys version come out in the upcoming year, it's got to be 2026 I figure, those will be more visually accurate than this, with high articulation points at both, and for less than half the price. So, unless you really are fond of how this company did their articulation, or you really want the other pieces of this toy, I guess your mileage may vary on that one. Yeah, this is kind of a dicey proposition, I would say. Really, to each their own on this one. Thanks for watching, folks. I'll catch you later, as long as my video editor decides to cooperate with me. Take care.